From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, this is a Headache Soul production. Welcome to Just the Tip-Sters, America's favorite true crime podcast, and I'm your host, Melissa Morgan. With me today is my beautiful and talented co-host, Joshua Bevan. Say hello, Joshua.
Oh, hi.
Hi. Do you know where you are now?
Is it my turn? Is it my turn to talk?
Yeah, when I say your name, you're like, what? It's like you're in a little cage and I have a button and you're like, what? It's my turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The electrocuted floor.
I didn't mean to wake you, but sometimes shit happens. So, guess who is sponsoring this episode?
Guess who?
Not the band.
No. Okay.
This is already starting off terrible, isn't it? Not the guess who.
Okay. Are we being sponsored by a tour of some kind?
Yes.
Okay.
By a tour that is known as Not Your Everyday Sightseeing Tour.
Hey, I like
the Graveline Tour.
Nice.
And this is from a Hollywood Reporter review, a portal into Hollywood's dark past.
Oh,
I like that. I like that a lot.
Mysterious.
Yeah, I like it a lot. So our wonderful friends at Graveline Tours actually did a blog this week and mentioned us. And the blog is lovely. It's about the ethics of murder tourism, about true crime in general.
Okay.
I love that they address the ethics of it, And it's a lovely blog, and I'm so grateful to be mentioned in it. So thank you, Adam, for that.
Wonderful.
But as a listener to Just the Tipsters, if you are in the Southern California area, and there's 6 different tours or something. I'm so excited.
Are there 6? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
I should have counted, but I was like, we have to take that one and we have to take that one. And the Manson's murderous spree is 3.5 hours. The rest of them are like 2 hours. I know. Are you going to be okay? Stuck with me for 3.5 hours?
Oh yeah, no.
In a car, in a fucking funeral car. You're gonna push me out onto the freeway, aren't you?
I'll drink some iced coffee. We'll be good.
With some mushrooms in it, I think you said.
With mushrooms, yes.
Joshua has switched beverages. So if you are a listener to this podcast, you can have a very healthy discount if you go to graveline.rip and you want to book a tour, a sightseeing tour, a murdery sightseeing tour. You can get 40% off if you put in the promo code Tipster40. And you get a nice, beautiful, healthy 40% off. I hope
that's generous.
Adam
Thank you,
lets
Adam.
us. Yeah, I hope he lets us use that too. I hope he gives us 40% off. Yeah, because every tour is worth it. Honestly, I'm like, how are you only charging this much for Manson's murderous spree? But I'm not going to tell him that he's not charging enough. Because you know how he is. He'll just charge us. He'll charge
more.
I'm kidding.
I don't know how he is. I've never actually met him.
I haven't either. But we talk every day. No, we don't. We talk a lot. And he is still on my watch and my phone.
Nice. Oh, good. He's getting all of his steps in from your watch.
Yeah. Okay, and he's not on my MacBook Pro though.
Okay.
Well, but I've tried to order things on my iPhone and it says, send this to Adam? ? And I was like, what the fuck? And the phone number that comes up is his.
Wow.
I don't know why. I know.
I do.
Yeah. Because you've made a deal with the devil. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, because I'm an alien. I forgot that part. Yeah. I'm like, why would it say send this to Adam? But yeah.
Okay.
We are very blessed to have friends in high places or in low places like graves.
Like 6 feet low.
6 feet under.
Right on. Thank you, Adam.
So this I'm going to call it a 2-part episode, even though it's only going to be 1 part, because it is 2 different cases, and you will see their connection. And this was brought to our attention by Tipster Suzanne, who is a brilliant human being who I should be paying her, but I'm not gonna. She actually does research and writes scripts for other podcasts.
Oh, cool.
So she has, some work that she has banked and been like, this is an interesting case. This is an interesting case for one reason or another. And I will be like, well, that is interesting. And she sent me 2 different ones. And I was like, wow, that is a connection. that I didn't see coming. That I just yeah. It's and I don't want to sound all waving my pink flag or wearing my hat with pink ears. It's a vagina hat, but it's like 70 years apart, women are still not being very well protected.
Okay.
Yeah. It's,
all right.
It's, you know, the cases are 1952 and 2022. And one of them is solved, sort of. You'll understand what I mean because there's video of the murder. And yet that perpetrator has not been charged with the murder yet.
Okay.
Due to some, legal bullshittery, which we'll get into. Yeah. So the first case, and I mean, I get it. 70 years ago, long time, people spoke differently. Some of the wording is is fantastical, but it's the murder of Diddie Cooper, Diddii, and it's a nickname. Her name is like Amelie. It's like, where the fuck does your family get Diddie from? But she was a socialite in New Orleans in 1952. In like the 40s, she had like a TV show, a radio show. She sang. She was a chanteuse. On Saturday nights, she hosted a show called like A Date with Diddie. She's like this beautiful socialite. Yeah. And she comes from this family who, she appears at a like her coming out is at a debutante ball in the South, all that bullshittery.
Okay.
So I love this writer. Her name is Lori Chiasson, and she wrote a really extensive, wonderful piece for academia.edu. And it's got great stuff in it. It's got great stuff. But she starts the information about Diddie's case with 3 different quotes, and I love it. The first one is from W.H. Auden. Evil is unspectacular and always human. It shares our bed and eats at our own table.
Wow.
The next one is from Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky. 100 suspicions do not make a proof.
Yeah.
And the last one is, Arthur Conan Doyle from Sherlock Holmes. Life is infinitely stranger than anything which the mind of man could invent. And that is true. So November 30th of 1952, Diddie Cooper is at home. Her name's Amelie Jane, but Diddie, everyone called her Diddie, was at her home, and she is found in the morning by her 7-year-old daughter, Allison.
Oh, no.
She had been strangled and bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument, and this case is unsolved. The murder weapon has never been found, and in a city as interesting and with so much history as New Orleans, it's like this is still a big case.
Wow. Okay.
I know. So she was married to James Jimmy Cooper, quite a bit older, and he owned a very popular restaurant in the French Quarter called the Court of Two Sisters. C-O-U-R-T, Court of Two Sisters. And it was a very popular hang with great food. And she and Jimmy were estranged at the time.
Oh.
So she had been married. This is so bizarrely twisty and turny. She had been married to a cigar heir to a big cigar company and had two kids with her first husband.
Okay.
She had a boy and a girl. And then she marries Jimmy Cooper. And within a year, they have a son.
Okay.
So when she is murdered, she is almost 32 years old, and her youngest son is 9 months old.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So I believe her older son was 5 and her daughter Allison was 7. And it's said that, Jimmy Cooper was this fantastic stepdad. He stepped up and it's not that her first husband wasn't, present. It's just that he was a really good stepdad.
Okay.
And really enjoyed being with the kids and wanted his own. So Jimmy isn't exactly squeaky clean, even though he had spent time in the Army during World War II. He was discharged and he spent 6 months in prison in the Cook County House of Corrections in connection with a car theft. But he gets out and he buys the Court of Two Sisters restaurant in 1938, and he makes it a great success. It's, he was very personable and welcomed people in, and it was just, the restaurant was filled with, tourists, and because there's a bunch of shipbuilding going on, servicemen and from all over the world. And it's, New Orleans was just kind of a hub.
Okay.
And he makes this a really popular restaurant. So he's, when he bought it, he was married to his first wife, Mildred Schmidt Cooper. And she kind of ran the restaurant when he was in the Army. And then they get separated, and then their divorce was finalized June 21st of 1951. On June 30th of 1951, he marries Diddie.
Okay.
So
maybe a little overlap.
9 days later.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think he met her like at the courthouse.
Yeah.
And then I think maybe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she comes from this family that's like, well thought of. Her father was a musician and her mom was very engaged in philanthropy. And of course, she's this proper young socialite. So she makes her debut, that stuff. I can't even. So sorry. It's just so like you think about it now. I'm like, makes my butt slam shut.
You didn't go to Cotillion?
No. No, sir. I was not presented. No. You know what? There's a picture of me at Easter wearing white gloves, but I'm 3.
Oh.
And I have a cute little outfit on with a hat. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I'm not really a glove girl. No. Yeah. But she first married Macrino Trellis Sr., and he's the heir to the Trellis cigar fortune. So they get married in 1942, and they have the 2 children, the son and the daughter, and they get divorced in 1947. And she has this variety show. Oh, I thought it was Saturday nights, but it's Tuesday nights, called A Date with Diddie. She, did lots of stage work, and she's, called like a chanteuse. She would host local talent shows. She's like everywhere, even in New Orleans, she's everywhere. And she meets Jimmy Cooper, and he divorces his first wife. They get married, June 30th of 1951. Mm-hmm. And he was a really good stepdad. And then they, find themselves expecting, and she has her first baby, only baby with him, Donald, and he's born in 1952. So what is heartbreaking is that Jimmy was a big drinker, and he wasn't like a happy drunk. When he drank, he became abusive, and he would make scenes, and they were very, very social. Because he owned the restaurant and because she was who she was, they were always socializing, and he would, say terrible things about their private life, in front of their friends. And he was just never, if he drank, it was just never going to be a good situation. And they had separated and reconciled, and even when she was pregnant, but they got back together just before Donald was born. And then while, he's now 9 months old, and they are separated again. She became afraid of him when he drank. And I guess it was April of 1952. There was a big party called A Night in Old New Orleans. And then Jimmy starts drinking, and he becomes increasingly intoxicated and belligerent. And he got into a fist fight with a guest.
Oh.
And Diddie is like, I'm not going home with you. She had friends take her. And then the next morning, he called all of their friends and apologized.
Oh, for the scene. Apologized. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So in May of 1952, he's arrested because Diddie calls the police. And he had, been abusive to her. And he's arrested wearing just his, the reports are just his undershorts. So I know. So it's like 1 year after their marriage, she files for a formal separation in June of 1952.
Okay.
I know. So he moves out of the apartment. And he has an apartment that's over top of his restaurant.
Over the restaurant. Okay.
Yeah. So he, stays there. So he pays her alimony and the cost of the rent. And he also paid for a weekly maid. And her grandmother moved in. Coralie Sampson moved in July. And, she was helping when Diddie had to leave or go out or work.
Okay.
So, it seems that Jimmy is wanting to take responsibility for his, for the family, for taking care of them, but he would never relinquish his key. And I guess she did not get the locks changed. Okay. So he had access to
he's got access
to the house anytime he wants. And he would sometimes like bust in if she had friends over. He would sometimes come in the middle of the night. It was like, this wasn't like the best of situations. Yeah. And it was basically only when he drank.
Sure. Okay.
When he drank, he just became a whole different person. So in October of 52, they had it was a outing that he wasn't supposed to be at, but he showed up. That happened a lot too.
Okay.
So she's with friends, and in front of these people, he keeps saying, "Please come back to me. Please come back to me." And he even begged one of his friends, "Look, will you please, be a conduit between the two of us?" And she's like, "No, this is not happening."
Okay.
So she has friends drive her home. She just, didn't want to be around him. She decides to go to Atlanta the week before Thanksgiving because her doctor said, "You need a break. You're on the verge of a nervous breakdown."
Oh, wow. Okay.
She's ordered by her doctor to get away from this stressful environment.
Got it. So it's so much that she's got to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's got to get some time away.
Yeah.
So the week before Thanksgiving, she, wants to get away from him, even if it's just for like a weekend. So on November 29th, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, she attends a Tulane LSU football game with two other couples. And Jimmy Cooper ends up getting a ticket and crashes the evening. And, it gets ugly.
Oh, no.
And Diddie is disgusted. And according to the friends, started to treat him with disdain, only speaking to him when it was just absolutely necessary. She wouldn't sit next to him. She ended up in a different row with their friends, so she didn't have to sit next to him. So Diddie had asked Jimmy if her son, Mackie, from her first marriage, could spend the night at his house. And they had a really close bond, and he was a really good stepdad. Can he spend the night at your house, and can you return him Sunday no later than 9:30 so we can go to Sunday school?
Okay.
So Mackie loved Jimmy and loved spending the night there. And it was interesting. He had never spent the night on a Saturday before. I guess it was always like a weekday.
Oh, because he's in the restaurant.
Right.
Yeah. That's a big night.
Yeah. You're so smart.
Yep.
You're so smart. So Saturday, you are. I know. I know you know. Saturday nights are busy in the restaurant industry, and especially after a big game like that.
Yeah.
So he really should have been at work, but she was like, okay. She said that he asked. She told friends he asked if Mackie
for the kid for the night. Okay.
Even on a Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah. So Jimmy takes Mackie to his house, and Diddie goes home. She gets home kind of late because she's with friends, and she gets home. A group of friends go to a cocktail party and then a steakhouse, then the Key Club. That's a great name. And then they actually go have coffee, and she doesn't even get home until 2 a.m. And she realizes she forgot her hat. And she says to her friends, "Oh my God, I have to go back." And they said, no, we'll get it in the morning. And then they never see her again.
Oh, geez.
So she enters her upstairs apartment, and she wrote a check to the babysitter.
Okay.
The babysitter caught a cab at 2:10 a.m. and locked the door on her way out.
So the babysitter has a key?
No, you can lock it and then close it.
Lock and close the door. Okay.
At 3:15, Diddie's grandmother, Coralie Sampson, hears a scream. She gets out of bed, and like where she is, her window faces the back of the house. And she is like, "Oh, there's a man in a gray suit getting into a light colored car and driving away." And she said, "Oh, you know what? That scream is my granddaughter, Allison. And she hates being forced to go to bed." So she dismisses it and goes back to bed.
Oh, geez.
At 9 a.m. on Sunday morning, Donald, the baby, is screaming because he's hungry.
Okay.
And the grandmother, Coralie Sampson, is like, why isn't Diddie feeding this baby?
Right.
So she goes to check on the screaming child, and the phone rang before she can get there. And the caller spoke in a low voice as if trying to disguise his voice, but says, "Can I speak to Diddie?" And Coralie, who of course had heard Jimmy's voice many times, said, "Who is this?" And the voice said, "It's Jimmy." And she says, Diddie is still asleep. Just call back later. And then she starts to fix a bottle for the baby.
Okay.
She looks at the clock and it's, getting close to 10 a.m. And she says, "Allison, go wake your mom up." The girl had already been in the bedroom and said, "Grandma, Mom looks funny."
No.
Mom looks funny. Her 7-year-old daughter
Jeez.
walks in to find Diddie laying half on the bed, her feet on the floor. She's in a blue nightgown that is turned inside out, a quilted house coat over top of that. She's naked from the waist down, which would suggest a sexual assault, but there is no proof of that. She has large gashes on her head. Purple finger marks are encircling her throat.
Oh, no.
Blood is smeared on her hands and clothes, and there's bloody foam coming from her nose and mouth.
Jeez.
Yeah. So her grandmother, God bless her, doesn't know that, what she's seeing exactly, but she thinks because there's blood coming out of her nose and mouth that she had a hemorrhage. Like a brain hemorrhage.
Okay.
So she, calls the doctor, and the doctor is like, "No, we call the police right now."
Okay.
So she's been murdered. And Coralie says, "How do you know?" And the doctor says there's gashes on her head and bruises on her throat. So, they call the police. Like as soon as he sees her, he calls the...
Okay. So he came, he looked, and he said no.
Yeah.
Okay.
He said, no, she's not sick. She's, So in the meantime, Allison, the little 7-year-old girl, has called her 5-year-old brother, Mackie, at home. Yeah. At their stepdad's house. At Jimmy's. House. Yeah.
Okay.
And said, "Mommy's sick." Little Mackie says to Jimmy, his stepdad, "Mommy's sick." Allison says, "Mommy's sick." So he calls the house, and the maid answers the phone and says, "Jimmy, Diddie's dead."
Boy.
So Jimmy takes this time to let his son know, "I don't know how to tell you, but Mommy died." His son says, "What does that mean?" And he didn't answer, but he gathers up the boy and heads over to the house. So law enforcement and all of Diddie's family are already there.
Okay. So
when he makes his way into the bedroom where her body is, he shows no emotion when he saw what happened to her. He left the room. I mean, and I'm not judging him on that. I'm not judging. No. He leaves the room where Diddie's body was, and he sunk onto the couch sitting next to his friend. Now, Diddie's, mother is not taking this well, and she points at Jimmy and says, "Nobody killed my daughter but that SOB." And Jimmy just hangs his head, and he doesn't reply. And he doesn't make any move to try and talk to her family. Yeah. He's not doing himself any favors.
Okay, but what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to get in an argument and say, no, I didn't.
Again, I can't judge him.
Try and talk your way out of it,
right? I can't judge him, but yeah, I don't know. If let's say you're hungover.
Okay, well, that probably too.
Yeah, let's say you're an inveterate alcoholic and you're hungover. Maybe you don't. Your response isn't, So the police observed that the back stairs, which they believe that's how the killer got in, had a thick layer of dust on the railing. And it appears that there's no forced entry to the front or the back. But he has a key. Jimmy has a key.
Jimmy has the key. Okay.
So the apparently the back steps were kind of narrow and a little bit dangerous. And if you didn't know the steps, you would absolutely hold on to the railing. And because there was dust on the railing,
dust on the railing, it
had to be someone who knew the house, the layout of the house. Right. I know. That's thin.
Yeah.
It's thin, but there's no, viable footprints under windows. Like if someone broke in that way,
Okay.
So either they're surmising either Diddie let the killer in
Okay.
or they had access of their own.
Sure.
Right. Now, here's the part that bothers me. They're saying there's no signs of a struggle. And I'm like,
other than the strangulation
Yeah.
and the blunt force trauma to the,
yeah,
other than that.
yeah, she probably just laid there.
Yeah.
Like, have at me. This is, I get it. It's now December of 1952 and people spoke differently. And this kills me here. This is from the Shreveport Journal in Shreveport, Louisiana. And it says, New Orleans socialite slain, motive and weapon being sought, and fatal beating. Now, the part that I just want to scream. Detective Captain William Dowie said that apparently Mrs. Cooper died without a struggle. The room had not been disturbed. Her hands, face, arms, and clothing were stained with blood, and there was a gaping wound on her forehead. A few specks of blood stained the bed clothing, and that appears undisturbed. This is obviously the most neat killer, if nothing is disturbed. And I really love that, here we are December 3rd in the Clarion Ledger from Jackson, Mississippi. Their police are stumped over socialite's death. Even the motive is not clear.
Yeah.
Right. So, of course, the police question, her first husband, and he had been paying her $100 a month alimony. And he was at home with his mother, and his mom is, the wife of the manufacturer of the
cigars.
Okay. And he said, I loved Diddie, but she didn't love me. She was cold.
Okay.
Yeah. They had 2 kids together, but, they questioned the neighbor downstairs who said nothing seemed different. I didn't hear anything. The paper boy didn't see or hear anything, different. It's the normal things you would do in an investigation. So they bring Jimmy to the police station for questioning, and they take Diddie's clothing, and those that Jimmy Cooper was wearing that night are sent to the FBI for forensic analysis. Now, this is 1952. Diddie is buried on what would sadly have been her 31st birthday.
Okay, well.
I thought 32, but she just was going to turn 31. So there was this extensive investigation, and they arrest Jimmy the next year, August of 1953, on first-degree murder. He is indicted by a grand jury. The prosecution would seek the death penalty. So jury selection begins in January of 1954. I just keep thinking about Sandra Rosas's case that they got it.
They went so fast.
Yeah, indicted in a year. So the DA assigned to his case was Assistant District Attorney Edward Haggerty, and he had gone on to become a judge and then preside over Jim Garrison's trial of Clay Shaw and the conspiracy to kill John F. K.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
John F. Kennedy. Yeah. I was like, wow, that's a pretty big DA in New Orleans.
Yeah.
13 months and 12 days after little Allison finds her mom's body, there is, this, everyone's watching every second of this 9-day trial. And she left, a bit of an estate behind. They're saying it would be like $54,000 now. She left an automobile, furniture, appliances, all of these things. Jimmy tried to lay claim, even though this is so fascinating. They had signed a prenuptial agreement. I didn't even think prenuptial agreements were a thing in the 50s.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is a lot of divorce for the 50s. I was
right. Good point.
I mean, they each had a divorce behind them.
Jenks owe me a Coke. Yeah. So the prosecution is trying to find, a motive for the murder. So they're like, Jimmy is, the social person known as the mayor of the French Quarter. He's Mr. Bowtie of Bourbon Street, and he's tired of paying alimony to 2 ex-wives. I know.
Okay.
I know. It's like, I guess things have been done for less, but I don't know. So even the little boy gave a testimony, Mackie, and said, I watched Rocket Squad on television and then I went to bed at 12:15 a.m. I think that's sort of weird because why does a kid is 5 years old, have a bedtime at 12:15? Jimmy is, not a good stepdad. Yeah, unless the kid is like a night owl. He recalls being woken up after the sun had come up with Jimmy Cooper shaking him awake. And he's like, I guess he was a really hard sleeper. He didn't, notice the phone call. He didn't, it's interesting, this kid. So there's not a lot of fiber evidence that the FBI would introduce into the case because, limited testing is available at the time, right?
Sure.
I mean, they took his clothes, his t-shirt and boxer shorts. There's no blood evidence on Diddie's hands that provided anything other than that the blood was hers, which is O positive, which is the most common blood type.
Okay.
So it's so weird. The coroner for Orleans Parish, Dr. Chetta, said, I'm going to note her death at between 3 and 4:30 a.m. on the morning of the 30th because of stomach contents.
Okay.
The jury was shown autopsy photos. He points out bloodstains on the bottom of her nightgown, explaining this showed that part of her gown had once rested on her head because she was beaten in the head. That's where most of the blood came from. So someone had pulled the nightgown up.
Okay.
But also, the nightgown was also turned inside out. But there's no evidence of a sexual assault. The body positioned that way would hint that there was, but even Dr. Chetta says there's no semen present.
Oh, okay. So he did look and said there's none.
Yeah, there's no sign of a sexual assault.
It's not that they skipped looking. He looked.
Right. Yeah. And he says there's blood coming out of her nostrils, out of her mouth, and she has a black eye. Her skull is fractured with a blunt instrument. There's contusions and abrasions on her jaw and marks like extended fingers on her neck. Now, the extended fingers part.
Yeah, what does that mean?
I'll tell you. So the hyoid bone had been broken, that's very typical in strangulations. It's a very small bone, and it happens in head injuries, but definitely in strangulations. So the doctor explained that the skull fracture alone would have killed her had she not been choked to death. But he said he thought she was choked to death with a blackjack.
Oh, so not just fingers, but a baton. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Not even though he's used the term extended fingers.
Okay. So there's bruising of fingers, but the actual
there's bruising of something cylindrical.
Oh, okay.
Like a blackjack. Held on her throat.
Okay.
Which would probably be easier to break the hyoid bone than hands. You can absolutely do it with your hands if you're angry enough.
Sure.
But it was like a blackjack was used.
Huh. All right.
Guess who has a blackjack?
Uh-oh. Does Jimmy own a blackjack?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
A friend testified and said he has an infamous blackjack.
Oh, no.
I don't know what infamous means, but maybe he enjoyed showing it to friends or something.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
They use other people's testimony, like one time Jimmy just entered the bedroom uninvited, just like showed up in her bedroom. And she said, he's never done that before. He didn't say anything. He just stood there and stared out the back window and then left as silently as he entered.
Oh, my God. So creepy.
That's a week before the murder.
Oh, geez.
A week. Yeah. So,
all right, Jimmy.
I know. Mary Augusta, the maid, testified that she always made sure that the back door was locked at night when she left, and that evening was no different.
Mhm.
She explained that the back steps were hard to navigate unless you were familiar with them.
Mhm.
Yeah. And she said she normally didn't clean that railing. She's the maid, but she normally didn't clean that railing until, it got really dusty, but apparently it was really dusty. So there's a night porter who works at Jimmy Cooper's restaurant, John Washington Merritt.
Okay.
And he testified that Jimmy Cooper asked to borrow his car the following day to take Mackie to Sunday school because his own car needed the brakes repaired.
Okay. What color was his car? Was it?
I don't know.
Was it a light car?
I don't know. He went to get the keys later to give them to Jimmy Cooper,
Mm-hmm.
and he couldn't find the keys. And then it dawned on him, oh, wait, Jimmy's got a set because he bought that car from Jimmy.
Oh.
So he goes to look for his car.
Jimmy collects keys, apparently.
Uh-huh. He's
Okay.
the key
He's
collector.
Yeah.
John Washington Merritt goes to look for his car between 3 and 4 in the morning when he's done with work, and the car's gone.
Hmm.
Between 3 and 4, does that time frame sound familiar?
It's very suspicious.
So he went back upstairs and just hung out in the apartment above the restaurant. And when he finally got a hold of Jimmy Cooper at 6:30 a.m., Jimmy Cooper says, oh, go look again. And his car was there.
Oh, my gosh.
Go look again.
Yeah, all right.
The car is there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Even the garbage collector testified that when he collected the trash the morning of the murder, John Washington Merritt's car was not there. Super weird.
Mm-hmm.
When the vehicle is examined, this is my favorite connection. A cigar wrapper is found.
Oh, boy.
Guess what kind of cigar?
Well, tell me this. What kind of cigar does
El
Jimmy
Trellis cigar.
smoke?
Her first husband's the heir to
Oh.
that cigar company.
Oh, it's...
But those cigars are exclusively sold at the Court of the Two Sisters.
Mm-hmm. Oh, boy. Oh, okay, but if they're sold in the restaurant, then the friend of the restaurant might have smoked one.
Oh, this is how smart you are. John Washington.
John Washington.
Yeah, Merritt is on the stand,
Mm-hmm.
and he is asked, do you smoke cigars? Absolutely not. They make me sick.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this is another beautiful part. The wrapper had not been in that car when I left it to go to work, and it's there on Sunday when I get my car back.
I'm trying really hard, Jimmy. You gotta...
Yeah,
Oh, boy.
he's like he's not a help to himself. He is not a friend to himself. So this is pretty fascinating. The police have really gone to a lot to try and get him.
Mm-hmm.
They even employed a former, I hate this term, they call her a strip teaser, a former strip teaser to date Jimmy after, his wife's been murdered, and try and get a confession out of him.
Oh.
And she said, well, he never confessed to anything, but he tried to strangle me.
In the course of the dating?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Now, that testimony was brought into question because Ms. Holmes, the stripper, is now married to a police officer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then she's asked by the police to, date him.
Oh, while she's married?
I don't know the
That's
time. That's her going.
That's
along.
an odd ask.
Yeah, that is. Maybe that detective was really motivated.
We need somebody to get a confession. Oh, my wife will do it.
Yeah, she used to be a stripper. She doesn't mind fucking other dudes.
Oh my God.
Does he have a lot of $1 bills? So Jimmy Cooper takes the stand, which is really sort of fascinating. And he says, I stopped drinking 2 weeks prior to her murder in hopes of reconciling with her. If I could straighten up and fly right, I could come home anytime I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Ms. Yvonne Holmes even her credibility is brought into question. She was, a barmaid, stripper, and now married, I guess maybe after.
Okay.
Yeah, after.
Okay.
Married to one of the policemen who was investigating the case. And she was a fugitive from Washington State, wanted for grand larceny. I don't even know what that means, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So interesting. So, here Jimmy Cooper is a little bit older, well, quite a bit older than his beautiful 30-year-old wife. And as the trial, comes to an end, Cooper is so cocky. He's like, I'm going to be out by the weekend.
Yeah.
And he's right.
Oh, okay.
28 minutes of deliberations. He's acquitted.
Acquitted after 28 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound like I have an agenda, and I promise you I don't. He is acquitted by an all-white male jury who applauds him at the end.
That's a weird thing to apply. To applaud.
Yeah.
The fact that they're all white men in 1952 or 54.
Not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I mean that. No, it's a big deal. I don't think it's irregular.
No, it's not irregular. You're absolutely right. But it just, what if he were a black man and his wife were murdered? What if he were a brown man?
Sure. I mean,
what if he were a red man?
Yeah.
Would that, matter?
No.
In the 50s.
Why applaud?
Right.
That's weird.
Domestic violence was not addressed in the 50s.
Yeah.
Are they like, hey, are applauding him like, hey, you got away with it? Or applauding him, hey, we don't think you're guilty? So I love the original question of one of those journalists. Police are stumped by even a motive. What's the motive? Who would have a motive to kill your beautiful young mother of 3 kids? Was it a stalker who saw her on television?
Sure. I mean,
robbery, they said, was not a motive because there were some small items missing. Those were reported by Jimmy Cooper, by the way. However, there was a fur coat and a bunch of money in full sight in the living room. And there was also money in the baby's room where Diddie was found. They weren't touched.
Yeah.
And a sexual assault was not, at all factored in. She had not engaged in sexual activity before her death, consensual or otherwise.
Okay.
So it's sort of fascinating when you think about what would be a motive.
Yeah, but
somebody who wants you back and you don't want to be with him, and then, right. I don't think this was a rando who happened upon, even though there's like some reports that there was some random violence in the neighborhood. It was like 4 separate acts of violence in 12 years.
Yeah.
But it's things that don't.
But it wouldn't be a random, because in order to get in, she would have had to let the person in and stay quiet long enough to not wake the grandmother and the children, the baby and the daughter. So,
or somebody had a key.
And then still stay quiet long enough not to wake anybody.
Right. If you know someone, maybe.
Yeah, I think it has to be someone she knows.
Right. So, Jimmy Cooper faces justice of another kind.
Okay.
2 years after he's acquitted for strangling his estranged wife, he's found dead on the kitchen floor of his apartment, the one above the Court of Two Sisters. The same coroner, Dr. Chetta, said there was enough barbiturates in Cooper's body to kill an ordinary person, but it seems he had been building up a tolerance to them for many years. He suffered from allergies and asthma, and he'd even been hospitalized at it twice during the trial. But his official cause of death, due to angioneurotic edema, a painful swelling of the windpipe due to allergic reactions. In other words, strangulation.
Okay. Wow.
Isn't that fascinating?
Huh. Okay.
So who killed Diddie Cooper? Yeah, nobody knows.
Yeah, okay.
I love that she was, her gravestone or headstone says Amelie Jane Woolfolk, which is her maiden name because her family didn't want either of her two husbands' names on there.
That's okay.
I
Good.
get that.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't look good for Jimmy, but
it doesn't.
Obviously he was acquitted, so it's
I guess
possible,
we got to pay attention to that, huh? Right. Yeah. Cut to
all right.
50 years later.
Okay.
June of 2022. Okay. And this is a really lovely, more personal sort of reportage by Lorena O'Neill in a publication called The Illuminator. On the morning of June 27th, 2022, Cassandra Jones is shot multiple times in broad daylight, and the entire murder is recorded on cell phone video from a nearby apartment.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. The New Orleans PD identifies the killer immediately as Jones' ex-boyfriend, BJ Brown, and she had filed a temporary restraining order against him the month before.
Okay.
It's now almost a year later, and he has not been charged with her death.
Oh.
She has 3 daughters. And
it's on camera. There's video footage.
Yeah. I'll explain why.
Okay.
It's a real shitty thing. Right. It's just another, I'm sorry, but 70 years later, did I say 50? 70 years later, another woman killed by domestic violence. Mm-hmm. And things really haven't changed.
Okay.
Things just haven't changed. I can't believe it's been 70 years. She has 3 daughters, and she has a set of twins and an older daughter. And they want to know why he hasn't been charged. And the short answer is the criminal justice system operates on a delayed justice because it involves jurisdictions, the way things are handled across state lines, and the way things are passed between different law enforcement agencies.
Okay.
Right. Her daughter, one of her twin daughters says, I don't think they've taken her case seriously. So these poor twins and their older sister, the twins are 19 at the time, and they're living in Jackson, Mississippi with their father. They got all these messages on social media saying somebody was shot in front of your mom's apartment building.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it gets worse. They try calling her and they get no answer. And finally, their older sister, Akila, reaches out to them and says, Mom's been shot and she's in the hospital. So the twins, race to New Orleans, and while they're on their way there, Joshua, they keep getting texts of pictures of their mother laying on the sidewalk, and she'd been shot in the leg. And they were like, okay, we heard she shot 3 times in the leg. We're going to get to the hospital and see what happens. Well, when they get there, a doctor says she didn't make it. No. Yeah. They have to identify their mother. They're walking out of the hospital, and a friend of Cassandra Jones says, look at this, and hands them her phone to see this video that's circulating of their mom being shot. No. And one of the twins says, we didn't know what we were about to watch.
No, that's... So
Jania throws up and Jalen starts crying. They didn't realize that the video was footage of their mother, that there was all of this, complete and utter footage of their mother. Yeah. They would not have watched it, especially at that moment.
Sure.
Jania replays the video in her head, and she has dreams where she wakes up and it's her that has been shot. She replays the sounds they heard, which was her mother screaming for help. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So BJ Brown fled to Erin, Tennessee, which is outside of Nashville.
Okay.
Authorities say he shot a police officer during a traffic stop, and then he ran into the woods. He was eventually taken into custody, but there was a statewide manhunt Cassandra Jones' daughters have received updates from the Tennessee authorities about Brown's upcoming trial for attempted murder of a police officer. He survives.
Okay.
The last time they heard from the New Orleans PD was a month after their mother was killed.
Wow.
A U.S. Marshal told them that he would keep them updated on any future court dates.
Yeah.
That did not happen.
Okay, but he's locked up. He's awaiting trial for the other. So it's not like he's just running around.
No, he's not running around.
He's in lockup.
But he may never see a courthouse in New Orleans because of non-communication between. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah,
it's absolutely terrible. So the New Orleans PD obtained an arrest warrant on second-degree murder. But because he was already arrested in Tennessee, he hasn't even been booked in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And the district attorney has never been given the case to file.
Jeez.
A DA's office has victim advocates to help families keep informed of the process. But because BJ Brown has not been processed, they haven't been assigned a victim's advocate.
No. Boy.
Yeah. You know, it's basically standard operating procedure when someone is accused of crimes in more than one state. The arresting state gets the first right to decide how they're going to move forward with charges.
Okay.
I know. Yeah. Whichever state has him in physical custody, they can keep him and then release him from, after he's gone through the process. They can decide if they will allow New Orleans to extradite him. So his arrest warrant in New Orleans remains active. If Tennessee complies, when he's done serving any time that he's sentenced to in Tennessee, the state's authorities can contact Louisiana to set up an extradition. I know. Now, here's another heartbreaking part. This lovely journalist, Lorena, does her research. And she feels bad that she is the person that explained to Jones' daughters what was going on.
Oh, wow.
They had been given no information, and they didn't know that Tennessee has the first rights to prosecute BJ Brown.
Mm-hmm. And
they were very upset. And they said, all of this attention is going to that officer when he murdered my mom, and the officer is still alive. I feel like he should be charged with my mother's death first and then the officer. One of the twins says, my heart is broken into pieces. We don't know when we're going to get justice for what he did to my mom.
Wow.
They did not even know, because their mom kept it under wraps. They didn't know that she had filed domestic abuse allegations against BJ Brown. They knew that she was going back and forth between her apartment and their apartment, like for work. I guess it's not that far across state lines, Jackson, Mississippi, and New Orleans.
Got it.
So, she would stay at both, places, but she files a temporary restraining order saying that he attempted to strangle her. He punched her and he threatened her life many times, according to these, court records. He did not show up to court for the protective custody hearing. This kind of a filing, it's common in domestic abuse cases, but it usually takes many times that someone's been abused before they actually report it. And a temporary restraining order has no effect on a firearm.
A temporary restraining order,
he wouldn't have to relinquish a gun.
If
she had gotten a protective order, then they can make sure they take his firearm.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. It's okay.
So the most dangerous time for someone who's being abused is when they try to separate from the person who's, doing this to them.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just, the period of time when a victim has only a, temporary restraining order is the most dangerous time of their life. That's reported by the Center for Relationship Abuse Awareness.
Yeah.
The twins even went to Cassandra's house after her death. And this is, I guess, Cassandra knew that things were getting bigger and deeper. She packed a bag by the front door and there was a knife next to it.
Oh, wow.
like to protect herself.
Oh, boy.
They knew things weren't going good between her and BJ Brown, but they didn't know that she had broken up with him. And they knew that because of her job, she was going back and forth between New Orleans and her twins' place in Mississippi. And sometimes they'd come and stay with her. In fact, one of the twins had just spent like the weekend before with her. They just didn't know how big this abuse was and how long it had been going on.
Sure.
After her death, all of her daughters were even more traumatized because of victim blaming on social media.
God.
People left comments on the video of her mother being murdered saying she shouldn't have dated somebody with a criminal history. She shouldn't have dated someone younger. You should have left him before the abuse began. The sisters try to find comfort in understanding these people don't know their mother. Instead, they want to remember Cassandra as the open-hearted, beloved friend, mom, and grandmother they knew. Her daughter, Jania, says, I want her story to be heard so that other children or mothers can understand not to be afraid to speak out or to let even their children know about abuse. You would never know something was wrong. She showed us how to be strong because she was strong.
Uh-oh.
And there is a time to be strong and a time to let people around you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope if anyone's going through this,
asking for help is strength.
I appreciate you saying that because you know what a problem I have with asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I have asked for help, you were like, I'm proud of you. And I appreciate that. It's it's asking for help for little things, nothing as big as this. But I still have trouble asking for help.
Yeah.
If you or someone you know is being abused, you can get anonymous, confidential help at the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. And even though we know who murdered Cassandra, I don't know that her family's ever going to get justice. And I've bitched numerous times about jurisdictions, about crossing state lines and how ridiculous I wish agencies, there was more cooperation. Yeah. So when I see that, I'm happy and enthused that people are talking to each other.
Right.
But the fact that he crossed state lines and shot an officer, and that's where he is being held. So that's where he's going to trial first. And we know how long it takes for a lot of things to get through the process.
Oh, sure.
I don't know that these girls are ever going to see justice. I'm going to hope that New Orleans PD and this agency in Tennessee keep an open line of communication and will let him be extradited and stand trial.
Yeah, let's hope.
And I know it's not going to make anything better for her daughters and her grandson. She referred to her grandson as her little prince.
No.
I know, it's just her oldest daughter had a baby and he is her little prince. I'm really trying not to wave like a feminist flag, but these two cases, 70 years apart, both involving what I'm going to call domestic violence, even though one is unsolved and one is unprosecuted.
Yeah.
There's way more of a connection 70 years later than I want there to be.
Yeah. We've come in some moments. It feels like we've come a long way, and then moments like this, it's no.
Yeah.
It does not feel that way at all.
Suzanne sent me these two cases. I just sat there and read them, and my mouth, and it was along with other cases she sent me.
Yeah.
But when I saw these two, I was like, holy shit. Both in New Orleans and both, 70 years apart, and both women who were probably murdered by their partner.
Yeah.
One unsolved and one, solved yet not prosecuted.
Yeah.
Right. So those are two stories of two women, and I know there's a lot more other crappy stories. And if you have a tip on a missing person or unsolved homicide, or you just want to suggest a case you'd like us to cover, please feel free to call us at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. You can email us at jttipsters@gmail.com. You can find us on any of the social media platforms at JT-Tipsters on Instagram. There's a Just the Tipsters Facebook page, at JT-Tipsters Pod on Twitter. and more cowbell.
If you would like to support this podcast and get early access and other cool murderous swag, go to patreon.com/justthetipsters.